Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Marty Lacker. And today, I think we're going to be saying goodbye to Marty, at least here in 1967 on the Circle G Ranch. And we're going to hear more about that as soon as we come back from this song, which is one of my new ones. It's called Frustration and Heartache. And it's about Elvis trying to find the love of his life, especially here in 1967.
He walked through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, all flames he can see. He called her my wife, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone, while the world kept intruding. Love turned to stone. Their eyes met again, the fire still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind them, the moment couldn't stay. She felt the heat fading as he walked away on the speedway set. She fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you'll know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one singer, lost in the rhyme. If love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear echoes about Marty Lacker. But first, we're going to start with Becky Yancey, who was a secretary at the Graceland office. And Becky worked with Vernon Presley, who was Elvis's father. Elvis's father was very important to Elvis's business. Elvis's father handled all of Elvis's personal finances. And there are a lot of myths out there that underestimate Vernon Presley. But he was extremely important. And he kept every record that came in. And he had to sort every one of those records out, those invoices and those receipts and all that business paperwork from the multiple bags of mail that would be delivered by a special truck from the post office every day that was full of fan mail. And that's what the secretaries like Becky were mostly doing, was going through the fan mail, trying to answer it and send out replies. They would gather all the gifts that had been sent to Elvis. And if you are watching the other series that I'm doing about the spiritual quest that Elvis goes through in the texts that he reads, the different books he reads, I show a lot of different artifacts, some of which it appears came through the mail and made it into Elvis's bedroom. And Becky says, as ranch manager, Alan Fortas took advantage of the decline in activity and traffic to put the Circle G in tip-top shape. So Alan Fortas, that is Elvis's friend, that used to go out to California and accompany him to the movies. But when Elvis bought the Circle G, he put Alan Foreman right here, along with his newlywed wife. And they're remaining in Memphis in order to care for the Circle G. And Becky Yancey goes on and says, Mr. Boucher continued caring for the cattle, now virtually forgotten by Elvis. So back in February and March, Elvis had bought a large number of cattle to go along with the horses to make it a real ranch. Not sure how many cattle he has, but I believe it's at over 100. And the guy that takes care of them, well, he's got to keep feeding them every day. Whether Elvis maintains interest in them or not, Becky feels Elvis has forgotten them. What we saw is Elvis came back to Graceland on August 26th. And on August 27th, the day after, he goes out to the ranch. And some people are reporting that he wasn't as fond of the horseback riding anymore, that he was going out there to do a lot of target shooting. But whatever he's doing out there, he's still on the ranch. And he's still going out there a few times. But it seems like he has cooled down from it some. I don't know if that means he's forgotten it. And Sonny West says, in September of 1967, Elvis decided to get rid of the Circle G. I think it had something to do with the fact that since his marriage, a lot of the guys weren't around anymore. This is an interesting statement from Sonny West, who was a bodyguard for Elvis Presley. He started working for Elvis in 1960. Elvis let him go famously in 1976. So this is almost right in the middle of that period. Now, Sonny hasn't been around so much this year because he was off filming that movie Hellcats. I'm not even sure if Sonny's around in September of 67. Hasn't really been made clear yet. But he's noticed that since Elvis got married, a lot of the guys aren't around. That's kind of true. On April 30th, Larry Geller stopped working for Elvis. Didn't tell Elvis, he told Jerry Schilling. But Larry stopped working. And then at the end of the filming of Speedway, which would have been this movie that Elvis just got back from on August 26th, would have ended a few days before that, Jerry Schilling, he decided to leave and stay in sunny California and try to become a film editor. So he's not working for Elvis anymore either. On May 1st, when Elvis got married, there was a giant rupture in the Memphis Mafia when Red West wasn't allowed to attend the ceremony itself. He was going to be at the reception, but he was not allowed because of space to be at the ceremony, or at least that's what was told to him. And he left for a few months. It appears he might be back now, like Sonny. So I'm not exactly positive, but they may be back in the picture at this moment in 1967 as we change from August to September. And Pat says it's a shame that he never should have let go of the Circle G. Hi, TT, ASMR, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Marty Lacker says, in September, I figured it was just time to move on. The day I told Elvis I was quitting, Elvis said, well, what if I need you? And I said, I'm not going anywhere. If you need me, call. You know where I am. Now, I find this to be an interesting conversation because I'm not exactly sure at this point in the timeline where Marty's living. I know that I believe, now I don't know because I haven't really researched this properly, that Marty was living in Graceland in the converted garage apartment with his family, which would have been his wife and I believe 2 children. Maybe 3. I think it's 2. But they were living there in 1966. So I'm kind of assuming he's still living there. But perhaps he's moved out. But he says on this day he's quitting. Now, Marty's had some issues from the previous episodes that we've learned about. There's been a series of incidents. And they all seem to indicate that he was having some issues with some prescriptions. So Gunn is asking, what did Marty go on to? A new job? Well, Marty doesn't tell us. He just says he decided it was time to move on. Kind of like Larry Geller. Larry doesn't tell us what he went on to. He just says it's time to move on. And we assume that Larry went on to cut more people's hair because that's kind of what Larry did. I believe that Marty, well, I know that he goes forward to get some jobs in the music industry, but I don't know how quickly he does that. He's been a DJ before, so he's done a lot of stuff in music. And so maybe we'll have to find that out, what Marty's doing in a future episode. But right now, he's just decided to go. And for the last month or so, he's been hanging out on the Circle G. That's where he's supposed to be helping. But he says all he's been doing all day is sleeping. And reading somewhat between the lines, so this would be speculation. But based on the fact that Marty's already told us that he's having some issues with prescriptions, and that others have indicated Marty's having some issue with prescriptions, and others have indicated there's a lot of people on the ranch having some issues, I think we might be able to equate the sleeping with maybe some issues that Marty was dealing with in that moment with the prescriptions. But now he's decided it's not even worth sticking around to sleep on the ranch. He's got to move on. Tarzan says that Elvis saying, "If you need me, call me," good friend right there. That is a good friend, right? That's the way that Marty remembers him. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. It is 3:15 p.m. here in Georgia right now. And David's mentioning that Marty's brother-in-law, that he built the meditation gardens in 68, or, well, it was before 68, but that is true. He did build the meditation gardens. And also builds the waterfall in the jungle room. And he redesigns and restructures or redecorates Elvis's bedrooms and upstairs suite. And he also built the trophy room, which previously was the slot car room. I'm kind of thinking he might have converted that garage into an apartment. Not sure on that. Can't say for sure on that one. And Gunn asked, did Marty come back later? Yes. Marty did come back a little bit. Well, I'm going to say yes, that Marty did come back a little bit later, but then he leaves again. So he is not there in 1977, but yes, I believe there is at least one more stint of working for Elvis. And Luann's asking, have I mentioned yet or not whether Elvis sold the Circle G Ranch? Well, he's made the decision to. Hasn't sold it yet. September 1967. He's getting ready to go film Stay Away Joe. And they're playing around on the ranch, and it appears that he's doing a little more target shooting this time than horseback riding. But he did get a lot of saddle sores last time, so maybe, and he's lost a lot of rings, right? There's been some gold rings lost out here. Maybe he's decided to move on to another hobby. And Pat says that she loves the jungle room. Pat, if you ever get a chance to go to Memphis and you can go to the Tiger Man dojo, you want to, because the very first thing you do on the tour is sit in the exact same furniture that's in the jungle room. That furniture was all made on an assembly line in a certain factory, and these were all made in that factory at the exact same time. So the spa guy went and tracked those exact kinds of furniture down so that you could have the exact experience of sitting just like Elvis did in the jungle. He's also got like a phone you can touch. It's a lot like a phone that was in there. It's a very neat experience. And Pat says that it's on her bucket list. And you gotta hurry because you never know how long he'll be open, right? Like, it's always a gamble. But Marty said it's September. He's figured it's time to move on. He's had this conversation with Elvis. And Marty says, I remember we were sitting in the dining room. And then we moved into the living room. So Marty's talking about Graceland. So if you've seen pictures or you've ever been to Graceland, the dining room, right when you walk in through the front door, the dining room's off to the left. He says they're sitting in there. I think that's the same place Marty was describing when he talked about filling out the paperwork for all the rancheros and the other pickup trucks that Elvis had bought for the ranch, and that he was having trouble matching them up with the people. And then he got someone to paint the name of each person into the door of the pickup truck so he would know whose is whose. But he says, then we moved into the living room, which we hardly ever used. So the living room, that's with the giant couch. Now, I don't know what's in it in the 60s. I think maybe it is that giant couch or one very similar to it. So they're sitting in that front living room, and he's saying they didn't use that very often because they would sit in the den, which is what we think of as the jungle room, but it was before what we think of as the jungle room furniture. But right now, they're sitting probably on that couch, that great big one that you see in all the famous pictures from Graceland. And Marion says, it sounds great that Spa Guy allows you to sit on the furniture. I guess at Graceland you could just look at it. And you have to look at it from afar in Graceland. You don't get to get real close to the jungle room. And David says he's been to Graceland twice and wishes he could go now. And Billy's, well, to finish this story with Marty Lacker out, which before I do, let me pull up this picture of Marty Lacker. So this is not Marty in 1967. This is Marty in the 1990s. I think this is like around 98, but it might be 95. I can't really remember. But sometime right in there. But that gives us an idea who this gentleman is. Marty says they're sitting in the living room, and Elvis says, you know, you'll always be welcome here. And Marty said, well, I appreciate that. I didn't think it would be any other way. So Elvis has told Marty that he's always welcome here at Graceland. Now I'm wondering, is Marty living there? Or has he moved out by this point? I've really got to get that figured out in the timeline. And Pat's asking if we all think that Marty was a good friend of Elvis. I actually got to write to Marty one time, and he replied to me. He was a very open person about replying to people. And if you asked him a question and it got to him, he would give you an answer. And this was through a website that you could leave the question and he'd look at it and then answer it at a later time. And I asked Marty, I told him that I'd read his book and that he mentioned many things that Elvis had given him and great things that Elvis had done for him. And Elvis did some amazing things for Marty and Marty's family. And Marty said that the greatest thing he ever did for Elvis, because that was my question, what was the greatest thing you did for him? As Marty said, he was instrumental in having Highway 51 renamed to Elvis Presley Boulevard. And that he also felt he had played a role in a couple of the recording sessions. But that it was truly the honor of the name of Elvis Presley Boulevard. And so that's what Marty saw as, like the symbol of the friendship that he had for Elvis. I don't know exactly what role he played in that, but he felt he had played a very important role in getting that renamed. And Tarzan asks if Marty has passed. He has. It was bizarre because Marty was doing laundry. You know, I'm sure everybody here has done laundry. And like all of us, or many of us, Marty was using a washing machine and a dryer. And Marty says that he bent down to pull stuff from the dryer and he lost his balance. And he started backpedaling, across the room. That he was able to remain upright, but he couldn't regain his balance and he just kept moving backwards, out of control. And he ended up falling on his rear end, but at the wall on the far side, and he smacked his back into it, and it was a very strong hit into this wall, and the fall onto the floor, and he ended up in the hospital. And so that's how he was able to report what happened for the accident. But he did not make it out of the hospital. I'm assuming that he had some kind of infection or something that came from an injury that was sustained in that moment. And Pat says that's so easy to do, right? So it's not so much bizarre as it's like falling in your bathtub. And it's terrifying because, like, we all do it, right? We all do something that's this or very similar to it quite often. And Gunn asked how old he was. This was within the last decade, I believe. It's definitely been within the last 15 years. So Marty was the same age as Elvis, so however old Elvis would have been about 10 to 15 years ago. And Billy Smith says that in September of 1967, Elvis took me and Joe and Charlie to Nashville. So Billy's talking about Joe Esposito and Charlie Hodge. Joe Esposito is the foreman, or the guy that's kind of in charge of the Memphis Mafia. They don't truly have a structure like that, but the guys go to Joe for most of the issues. Marty was the co-foreman, but earlier in the year he'd been demoted. So I guess that's one of the reasons he feels that he needed to go. And Gunn says that it's bad luck, then not an age thing. Yeah, I mean, he was old enough to be retired, so he was an older gentleman. But there was definitely a large amount of bad luck connected to it. And Anna says that recently she fell off her bed while sleeping, and it sure did wake her up quick. Wow, I bet it did. I haven't done that for a really long time, so I bet that woke you right up. And Tarzan says that the age did play a part, he believes. Yeah, I think Marty wasn't as spry or, as, he didn't have the ability to heal that I think he probably did before. And I'm not sure that he may have had internal injuries or something. I'm not sure. I just remembered the accident itself and thinking, oh, he's going to be all right. And then he didn't make it. And Gunn says that she hopes Anna's bed wasn't too high, and Pat that she hopes Anna's okay. Yeah, I hope you're okay too. I'm assuming you're telling us the story because you are okay, but if you're not, let us know. So in September of 67, Billy Smith saying that he and Joe Esposito and Charlie Hodge, they all go to Nashville to record, which is a little ways away from Memphis, but it's a lot closer than Hollywood. And the recording equipment is, according to people who know about it today, they say that the recording equipment in Nashville was way better than it was in Hollywood. And Elvis cuts songs such as Guitar Man, Big Boss Man, which those are interesting because we're going to see those recycle in the next year. He records High Heel Sneakers. And this says that Big Boss Man and High Heel Sneaker, or Billy says Big Boss Man and High Heel Sneakers have been recorded before, but Elvis's versions didn't sound like nobody else's. He put his own stamp to them. So Billy got to be there when Elvis recorded Big Boss Man and High Heel Sneakers and Guitar Man. That's pretty awesome, right? TT ASMR is asking who fell off the bed. Anna, one of our people in the chat here, one of our viewers. You know, and sometimes I've seen this happen that if you go to the very top of the chat, and I think you can just see I did it on screen, you can change it from top chat to live chat. And if it's on top chat, sometimes it just cuts people out and you don't see them at all. And so I always try to change it to live chat, although obviously I've forgotten to do that here. So sometimes if you think somebody might be talking and you're not seeing them, make sure that you've got that live chat clicked on. And Luann says that she's in one of these modern townhouses with white stairs and a handrail. Coming downstairs one morning, she missed the last step and screamed as it was going down. Yikes. Yeah, I've missed a couple of steps like that too. And Marion says that she loves the songs. Thank you so much, Marion. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So on September 1st, Elvis recorded High Heel Sneakers by Robert Higginbotham with Charlie McCoy on harmonica. Ultimately, it did not chart. So it didn't make it onto the charts, but Billy thought it sounded great when Elvis was recording it. Now, what's interesting is September 1st is not the day that Elvis recorded Guitar Man or Big Boss Man, I don't think. Well, definitely not Guitar Man. It's going to come a little bit later. So it feels like Billy got to go to multiple sessions here in September. And Peter Guralnick, he says, now Peter Guralnick, who is he? He's the leading researcher in Elvis history. And he wrote 2 books about Elvis back in the 90s. They're considered like the Elvis Bibles in a way, as far as timelines and factual information, research. He's got a new book out right now about letters from the Colonel that he's been able to see from the Graceland archives. He's always had a special relationship with Graceland, so he's gotten special access to the archives since way back in the 90s. He was also a personal friend and wrote a book about Sam Phillips, the man who recorded Elvis for the first time. And it is an amazing, fact-filled book. And you see Sam's movements during Elvis's lifetime, which are really interesting. Not just the part where they intersect, but the part where they've gone their own ways, and then every so often they come back together. And so it's a very interesting look at somebody who was really important to Elvis. And then if you pair those books with like the books by Alana Nash, that would make like what would be the core of a research library right now. And what you're going to get from those books all together is a whole lot of references that you could then go and track down to the source material. I like to go right on back to the source material. That's what we look at most of the time. But sometimes I just don't have access to it. So we've got to kind of listen to Alana and Peter about what they were able to find, because they did a lot of really great interviews with people. Albert Goldman's another one of these that you could stick in here. But then Albert's got a lot of opinions you really have to push to the side. But Peter, he does love Elvis and Sam and all of rock and roll. He is a fanboy of rock and roll. And he does have a very recent interview out about his newest book that came out this week. It's out on YouTube. It's really good. And Gunn says that Elvis had to go upstairs to his room, people running up and down. Do we know if anyone hurt himself on his stairs? Well, that's an interesting question. And he had two sets of stairs, because there was one in the front, one in the back. But I have not heard of anyone hurting themselves on those stairs. And there's a really steep set of stairs down into the basement. And if you go to Graceland, you get to go up and down that set of stairs. And it feels like, I'm 6 foot tall. It feels like I'm going to hit my head on it. So I believe that there are fans that have hit their head on that, and they would have had that harmful experience. But I don't think I remember any of the guys saying they slipped on the stairs. But that's an interesting question. And Luann says, do you reckon the job Marty was in was too hectic for him? No, Marty, that's a good question, Luann. Because at times it will feel as if I'm dismissive of what Marty is saying. Or I'm painting Marty as a pillhead. I feel like I do that sometimes. But Marty, like all the people that Elvis has surrounded himself with, he is an extraordinary individual. And some of the accomplishments that he's able to accomplish outside of Elvis, they truly are monumental in the rock and roll world. And I can't name one off the top of my head. It has to do with some of the recording things that he did. I could gather that for us, but he was a very bright person. And he was very capable. But in this year, in 1967, the drugs have gone too far. And they've made the job too difficult for him. It's really the drugs. And I want to join this conversation for a second about David. And David, I have noticed that, I do have a little bit of difficulty understanding what you're saying, but I want you to keep on going, because I know that others in the chat are picking up a lot of it. And I'm learning more of it as you continue to type and you continue to put things into the chat. So, like the language barriers that we have with some of the international people, we're going to get through this. And I want to thank everybody in the chat that is reaching out to David to help him communicate with us. And that we understand that you're having an issue on that end, and we're going to work on it on this end. And Tarzan says that that the picture at the bottom of the stairs is a picture that Elvis was riding a unicycle on, which from Tulsa, which is where he's from. And you're talking about that picture that is it's like a painting of the top portion of a picture of Elvis on that unicycle. Yeah. And it's, I think the stairs in the kitchen, right? Or I don't think it's that main set when you first come in, but yes, I know that picture you're talking about. And Peter Guralnick, he lets us in on some behind the scenes stuff to kind of set up what's going on here with this recording session. And he says that during the summer, Elvis had heard a new song on the radio called Guitar Man by fellow RCA artist Jerry Reed. So Jerry Reed, who wrote the song Guitar Man, he also performed it and recorded it. He's under the same RCA umbrella, which tends to make licensing, which is a big deal for songs, a little bit easier. So Elvis, he puts out the word, and I'm assuming through Colonel Parker. This doesn't really detail that. But he puts out the word to Freddie Bienstock, who is in charge of Elvis's publishing affairs. So Elvis owns a piece of all the songs that he sings because of these publishing rights. And that's what really is bringing in, it's not just the royalties from the songs being replayed by RCA. So like these licensing agreements that we hear about are sold in 73, I don't think those included publishing rights, which Elvis would have still owned to all these songs. I'm not really sure about that. We'll have to look into that in more detail one day. But Elvis doesn't have just one revenue stream from these songs like most artists. He's got a second one coming in from the publishing. And we'll get in one day to how all of these revenue streams work. But the important part is that that revenue stream is handled by Freddie Bienstock. And it's his job to go out and talk these artists who have written their own songs into giving Elvis Presley a cut, so that they can record this song and put it out on the airwaves and make a whole lot more money for everybody than this artist could hope to ever make on their own. Now, most artists go for this, but famously, Dolly Parton did not do this. She did not want to be part of this deal. And there does come a point, I think, where Elvis starts to change the way that the deal works, because he doesn't really like it either. But that's a story for another time. And so what we're concerned with here is that it was Freddie's job to go to Jerry Reed and talk Jerry into selling some of this, the rights to this song to Elvis, and then Elvis would record it, and then Jerry could reap in the benefit of all this money that's going to come in. Because they're going to get paid off of every recording, just like the artist who sings it. That's the way this publishing works. And he's also supposed to get the licensing to the Jimmy Reed blues song, Baby, What Do You Want Me to Do? And also to a song that Vernon has asked Elvis to record. Vernon, Elvis's father, he wants Elvis to record From a Jack to a King. Now, we know that that song may be on the family's mind right now, because Donna Presley has a wonderful story about earlier in this year when her father was on guard duty outside of the cottage at the Circle G, and Elvis sang From a Jack to a King just for him because it was his favorite song. Well, it turns out it's one of Vernon's all-time country favorites too. So the family loves this song, and Vernon wants Elvis to record it. And Sergeant Swag, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Jen. Oh, I've seen you already here. So I'm just trying to catch up in the chat here. Right, back to this story. That Elvis wanted the rights to these songs, but Freddie, and he works at Hill and Range. That's the name of the company that Freddie works for that handles Elvis's publishing. There have been some changes in the business recently. So Freddie was now in charge of Great Britain, and his attention was on Great Britain and not focused on Elvis. And he saw an opportunity in Great Britain for some personal gain. And that's what he was really trying to get done during these moments. And even though the Colonel and Tom Diskin were attempting communications with Freddie, he wasn't all that responsive. And it's going to end up playing a part when they go to record these songs on September 9th, on September 10th and 11th. So on September 9th, Joe Esposito and Elvis flew to Nashville, and according to this source, they left Priscilla in Bel Air. So apparently, at some point early September, not only had they gone to Nashville, they had then flown out to California, apparently with Priscilla. And then they're leaving her in Bel Air in order to come back to Nashville. Now, this source, I have said maybe they were wrong once before. But it turns out that they were right. So I can't say that this is not correct. In fact, I kind of have to believe that they're basing this on something, some source that they've seen, and that I just haven't seen it yet. And so on September 10th, they're in Nashville, Elvis is, along with Joe Esposito, and it feels like Billy Smith is there because we're now going to record some songs that Billy Smith has indicated he was there for. And they're going to now this source says that they're recording some bonus songs to fill out the Clambake soundtrack. Which I guess that might be true because Clambake hasn't been released yet, so probably the soundtrack hasn't been released yet either. So they're getting some extra work done here. But that Elvis really wanted to record this Guitar Man song. Now, I'm sure that you've heard this myth before about this Guitar Man recording, if you've known much about Elvis or followed him much. And the myth is that Jerry Reed ends up coming in, playing the session, and that he then gets into a fight because he doesn't want to give up the publishing rights to the song. And And it feels like when we hear these stories that they brought Jerry in on the spur of the moment because Elvis had just come up with this idea. Hey, let's record this Guitar Man song. And that's why these publishing rights were in question. But what we've already learned is that Elvis had already targeted this song. It was going to be recorded, and Freddie, well, he didn't ever contact Jerry. And so that's why there's a problem here. And Pat says, why did they leave Priscilla in Bel Air? It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that explains that. Now, I'm assuming they're going to go back to California. They're going to start production on Stay Away Joe, but that doesn't really start until October. So maybe she just likes it better out there. She may be house hunting because they are going to buy a house within about 2 months. So there's ends up being this big misunderstanding this night about the publishing rights on this song, Guitar Man, because Reed is contacted and he does come in to play on the song. But it is a surprise to Reed. But this is why Elvis is flabbergasted by the situation. It's not that Freddie is asking Jerry to do something that's outside of what their normal procedures are, or what the normal deal is. It's that this deal is being done right in front of Elvis, and that's not how this business is supposed to be conducted. And that puts Jerry in a terrible spot as an artist, and Elvis recognizes that. And this becomes a major problem for Elvis as well. Jerry even storms out at one point. And Jerry says, let's hear a little bit from Jerry himself. Jerry says, I never thought of myself as a Nashville recording musician because I was a stylist. I only played my stuff, and I wasn't worth a darn playing all that other stuff. So what Jerry's telling us is that he's not Chet Atkins. You bring Chet into the room, and you tell Chet, hey, I want it to sound like this or to sound like that, and Chet delivers. And he does it exactly the way you want, and once he nails that performance, he can do it again and again and again. And Jerry's saying, that's not the way I do it. I do it my way, and that's the only way. And that's why I'm not a studio musician. You don't call me to come into the sessions because I'm not good at replicating the performances or playing it like the way that you feel it should sound. I can only make it sound the way I think it should sound. And Jen says that she really likes the clip of Jerry saying how good looking Elvis was. That is a good clip. And Luann says that she wishes Elvis could have found any other manager, that there must have been other managers around. And so Jerry says, you see, I had my own tuning, and they were trying to record Guitar Man, and they couldn't make it feel like my record. And I forget if it was Pete Drake or Charlie McCoy or Chip Young. These are all famous recording or musician guys. That one of those musicians said, well, these guitar players in here are playing with straight picks, and you know, Reed plays with his fingers. So they called me, and I went down. And I hooked up that electric gut string, and I tuned the B string up a whole tone. and I tuned the low E string down a whole tone so I could bar it straight across. Now that's a guitar thing he's talking about. He's tuned the guitar so that he can lay his finger across and hit a certain chord that you would normally, it would take multiple fingers to make that chord. But he's going to be able to move his one finger that bars all the strings at once up and down the neck of the guitar to make this it's a stylistic way that he's going to play this, and it's going to sound slightly different because the strings that are making the notes are not the strings that would normally produce these notes. And so I like this because it talks back, if you're following my other series about the spiritual quest, it talks about the tension in these strings. And we've talked a lot about the tension between two different points and how the truth lies in the middle. And what Jerry's saying is, I get to that truth by tuning my entire instrument differently than everyone else does. And it's his little secret. And Jerry says, as soon as we hit the intro, you could see Elvis's eyes light up. He knew we had it. It was just a jamming session. And I thought I was going to be so darn nervous I couldn't play. But it was right the opposite. I got pumped. And then Elvis got pumped. And the more he got pumped, the more I did. It was like a snowball effect. And to tell you the truth, I was on cloud 9. And once Elvis got in the spirit, things really began to happen. When the guitars and the rhythm sounded right, I guess the guitar lick kind of reminded him of what I say. And he just sort of started testifying at the end. That was how it happened. One of those rare moments in your life you never forget. So Jerry tells us of an amazing experience recording this song with Elvis Presley. And in a few moments, this wonderful feeling, this unity that they have created together with all the other musicians, and the glorious feelings that are emanating from it, they're all about to be ruined because there's about to be an intrusion of business and commerce into this sacred temple of sound, just like we've seen mirrored in the Spiritual Quest series. But that's where we're going to have to leave it for this one, and we're going to have to come back into this studio and hear the rest of the story of what happened with the recording of Guitar Man in the next episode. But I'm going to leave you with a new song, and it's the same song that I played at the beginning, but it's also different. This one's called Heartache and Frustration. Thank you all so much for being here. You all keep on taking care of business.
You walk through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel, love you can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, old flames you can see. You called her Marty, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone, while the world kept intruding. Love turned to stone. Their eyes met again, the fire's still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind him, the moment couldn't stay. She felt that he faded as he walked away. On the speedway set, she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she'd keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one singer, lost in the rhyme. Love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.